Hello everyone, this is Ben, one of the authors of 5 Torches Deep. Just going to do a quick flip through today so you can see what the print book looks like. There's a pretty comprehensive table of contents. We try to lay everything out so that it was easy to reference without having an index. So the main draw of 5 Torches Deep is that it is compatible with 5th edition while trying to bring in some more of the OSR style principles and gameplay elements from TSR era versions of D&D. There's a pretty straightforward mechanic, but one of the main differences is that there's a default difficulty class now of 11. So most of the time you're going to be rolling against a set number as opposed to DM Fiat. Some nice artwork by Sebastian Rodriguez. So there's your 4 standard fantasy races. Ability score creation is a little bit different than in 5th edition and other games. Each of the races has a slightly different spread. So humans are the most variable, being able to roll 3d6 for everything. But for example, like dwarves, they always start with a 13 in their constitution and their strength. And rather than having race as class, we do have some class restrictions based upon that specific race's ability scores. Typical 5th edition ability scores with modifiers, so it's not like the BX array. This is much more contemporary. Leveling only goes to level 9 for 5 Torches Deep. We thought that anything 10 and above really is starting to get into name and domain level play, which is not the focus of this game. Each of the classes fits on a single page, and one thing that's a little bit unique about 5 Torches is there's only 4 classes, but they each have 3 archetypes, which are sort of like a subclass, which you unlock at level 3. So it's quite quick and easy to make a character at level 1, and then you can diversify and get a little bit more complex once you hit level 3. You'll notice that this uses 5th edition proficiency bonuses as well, and every level you get some kind of benefit and class feature. So you can pick either from an archetype feature, or you get an ability score increase, or something that's inherent to the class. We try to have all of the layout fit on a single page for each rule, and a single column for each specific heading. So you can see that armor and shields takes up a single column, and nothing goes across more than just a spread. So everything is designed to be easy to print out at home, and this is standard US letter paper. And that way you can, if you have a specific page that you want to reference, like this weapons table, you can print that out at home and have it handy. One of the things that makes a game feel a little bit more OSR, in my opinion, is the adherence to resource tracking. In 5 Torches Deep, that's measured by supply, which is sort of an abstraction of how many resources you have, how well supplied you are. The big thing is that it doesn't allow you to invent any new equipment, but it allows you to resupply stuff that you brought with you, such as rope and arrows and torches. We did try to have examples for every rule in the book, and those are highlighted in those yellow boxes. One other thing is there is durability and sundering. So this is allowing you to, gives you an excuse to have different types of armor and potentially invest into some repairing. Some art here by Per Fulmer, who's the main artist of the game. So this just goes through all of the different elements. There is a pretty simplified initiative tracking where everybody is just based off of their dex score. So one of the things that we did in 5 Torches was try to make all of the ability scores matter, not just the modifier. So your dex score actually has a mechanical impact. One other interesting thing here is this injury table. So anytime you ever get to 0 hit points, regardless of the reason, you will roll on an injury table if you are revived. So if you aren't revived, you die, but if you are revived, whether through magical healing or an ally making a check, you would have to roll on this injury table. And you can see that there's a large percentage of it where you are losing ability scores or body parts. Five Torches does include morale and what I call a travel turn. This is similar to BX travel turns or dungeon turns. However, it's every hour when you're in a dangerous scenario like a dungeon, or every day when you're in the wilderness. And the DM just rolls once a 1d20 and to determine kind of the state of the journey. There are some rules for overland and overwater travel and timekeeping. One of the new rules is rolling to return. So this is useful for if you're playing one-shots or a West Marches style game where you might have a rotating cast, but you want to make sure that all of the PCs return back to base at the end of the session. So this gives them an opportunity, a mechanical way to quickly make a single check to determine did they get back safely, how much equipment did they lose, or how much damage did they take on the way home. Specific rules around light. There is a kind of catch-all corruptions rule here as well, which is for everything like infections or diseases or magical curses. Speaking of magic, spellcasting is a little bit different in Five Torches. Rather than having Vancian spellcasting where you only have so many spells per day, spellcasters know a certain number of spells, but they can cast those spells as often as they wish. But every time they cast, they have to either choose to cast it quickly, and they therefore make a spellcasting check, or cast it slowly, which is called a rite, and it takes 1 hour per level of the spell's level. If they roll a quick cast, they have to make a check, and if that check fails, then they roll on the magical mishap table, and some of those are pretty crazy. For example, all of the party's metal might melt. Some rules around scrolls and magical items. Again, like everything in Five Torches, from a layout perspective, tried to fit it all on a single page or a single spread. So if you are a player who wants to reference your arcane spell list, you could just print this page out and have that handy. All the spells are written to be as concise as possible, but compatible and familiar to people who've played. One thing with Five Torches is it would not be imbalanced if you were to take spells from Wonder and Wickedness or other OSR sources, or even more modern 5th edition spells. So one of the things that makes a game have that old school feel, in my opinion, is the ability to hire retainers, henchmen, and to kind of get to that level where you are well respected. So there are rules for retainers. More elite retainers are called a hench. You can have a character that specializes in giving orders, in which your whole retainer unit makes an action as a single entity. And there's a very brief social mechanic for NPCs to check to see if they know you and know of your party's exploits. One of the things that Jess and I are really proud of in the game design itself is distilling the monster section down into something that's basically just a toolkit for GMs to be able to produce their own monster. And so this math is based off of hit dice, and every monster has an average amount of hit points, something that they're weak at, their typical modifier, and something that they're strong at. And so you can very quickly determine an 8 hit die monster on average has 33 hit points. Their lowest modifier is +2 and their highest modifier is +10. Continuing with monsters, we give some sort of inspired by 4th edition and games of that era in the mid to late 2000s of different monster categories and then specific monster techniques. So these are sort of abstract rule chunks that allow you to refluff them how you like to make a monster a little bit more interesting than just rolling damage or fictional positioning. Quick rule about hordes, which I think is quite clever. You just refer to the highest hit die of the single NPC in that dungeon and multiply it by 1,000, and that's how big the treasure is at the end of the adventure. Some rules on converting and building monsters, as well as a quick table of just example monsters so you can see how the toolkit system actually works. Finally, a game master section, which this just mostly goes off of for people who are less familiar with OSR and running games in this style, some of the principles to follow, and just sort of guidelines on what is important in an OSR context. This page or spread here is designed to really just give you the opportunity to quickly come up with a session or inspiration for your next session. So you can roll some number of dice and get inspiration by combining different abilities, different aspects and elements of an NPC or a place. We also came up with a somewhat novel technique to create a dungeon layout. So you just scramble up a 6-color cube and roll it like a die, and then that will give you, by the way of a compass, the threat level of each area. So you can see we scrambled up this one, and this is the dungeon here, corresponding with how dangerous each area is. And finally, at the back, there's a single spread that has basically everything you need to know. From a rules perspective, this would be handy for a GM to print out or to give to new players. And the last page is a character sheet designed by Sam Mamelli. So that's 5 Torches. We wanted to be able to have the book lay completely flat, but unfortunately with drive-through, their printing options only gave us this glue binding. Because it's extra wide like this, however, if you turn to most pages and you just kind of mush it a little bit, it doesn't really damage the spine and still allows you to lay it flat at the table. Overall, we think it does the job of marrying 5th edition and OSR games. Thanks for the watch.